Hey friends, this is Michael Boehm with Youth Apologetics Training. Today we're going to keep going with this series about Caesar's Messiah, the book, and also the documentary film. Yesterday we discussed, and many days before now, we've discussed many problems with this new conspiracy theory that's storming the internet about the Romans inventing Jesus. Jesus never existed. They invented this Jewish Messiah to calm down these rebellious Jews. One of the things that I think was compelling that we talked about yesterday is the fact that we have Joseph Atwill. He's postulating that this Titus came up, along with Josephus and some others, came up with this Jewish Messiah to calm down the rebellious Jews and also to get them to worship him unawares. But then we have a problem here because most of the direction of the New Testament, what you're seeing is this Jewish Messiah being taught to and pushed on the Gentile world. They weren't the rebellious Jews. They were the Gentile world that was already making sacrifices to Caesar and serving Caesar. All right, this is not exactly a good plan, if you know what I mean. We also talked about the fact that these Romans felt it was a very big deal for you to serve their gods. And to not serve their gods was a serious concern because they felt that it would anger the gods. And here we have a faith that supposedly the Romans came up with that says to serve God alone and that every knee would bow to this Jesus. Not exactly a pro-Roman document, okay? Again, here's another idea, another thought, another problem with this theory. And this is brought up in Chris White's short little documentary or short little film, Caesar's Messiah Debunked. He brings up the fact that about 75% of the Roman Empire consisted of slaves. All right, and so here we have a faith that supposedly the Romans came up with. And the Romans are very concerned about a slave rebellion. 75% of the Roman Empire were slaves. So if they had a big cause to rally around, that could be a massive problem for the Roman Empire. And here we have this religion that breaks out that the Romans started, okay, that consists of, or at least has the main leader of this group that everyone worships is a man who is falsely accused of criminal charges and then is crucified. He's executed by the Roman government. Not a good idea on the Romans' part if they had actually made this up, right? This again would be a massive goof on the Romans' part because now you have this faith cruising around and guys, let's face it, it was also preached to these people in prisons, the people who were slaves. It was great news for one who was a slave. It was great news if a slave owner became a Christian. It was a great news for the slave, and they would hear the gospel, and they would most certainly accept it when they started seeing a changed life through their slave owner. All right, this was not exactly something you would expect coming from the Romans if they were the ones that actually made it up. Another interesting thing to think about is that the Romans were persecuting these believers. All right? So they come up with a faith, and then they're going to persecute and kill these new believers who were part of this faith. Then you had problems with some of the Flavian's family members or relatives converting to Christianity. That doesn't make any sense either. Okay, if they came up with the religion, why were they converting to this faith and then being persecuted for their convictions as being somebody part of this faith? Don't you think somebody that was part of the family would pull them aside and say, hey, come over here, let me show you something. You're believing a joke. We started this. This was actually our creation. But no, you don't see that happening. Another problem. this faith supposedly was to be preached to these rebellious Jews like the Sicarii. All right? Here's the thing, though. Jesus wasn't exactly a palatable Messiah to the Sicarii, all right? They were, I mean, let's face it, they really didn't like the Romans. They were pretty worked up. They were very angry at the Romans. And we have this Messiah who, okay, for the most part, was a very peaceful Jew, all right? Jesus was, yes, he did go into the temple and start turning over tables and causing a stir. And yes, he will come again, and when he comes again, he will be the conquering king, and every knee will bow to the Messiah when he comes back. But to the Sicarii, who wanted to overthrow Rome and to, incite a rebellion, this Messiah was not exactly somebody they would find palatable. This is not somebody that they would say, hey, let's rally around this guy. So again, it just doesn't seem to work. I mean, here we have a scene in the Garden of Gethsemane where Peter whips out his sword and hacks off the ear of one of the very people who has come to have him arrested wrongly and end his life. And what does Jesus do? He's like, Peter, put away your sword. And Peter puts it away, and then Jesus, well, it kind of sounds like he picks up the ear off the ground, although maybe I'm making that up, and he kind of sticks it back on the guy's head, and the guy has a healed ear, and he's looking around going, whoa. All right, that is not the type of story as a Sicarii. I mean, you'd read that and be like, what? No. Peter, I'm with you, man, but who's this other guy? It doesn't make sense. Another problem. Why write the entire New Testament in Greek to a bunch of Jews? Have you thought about that? All right, Greek. All right? You've got a group of people who are very nationalistic. They are very much prideful of their roots. And it's like, here, read this book. It's about your Messiah. And, oh, by the way, it's in Greek. What? No, they wouldn't be very interested in that. Really. But why was the New Testament in Greek? Aside from Atwill's theory. Well, guys, it was a unified language. It was the perfect language for a missionary faith. We're talking about God's gospel getting out to the whole world. And we had a perfect situation set up with the timing of Christ coming and the New Testament being written. Here we have Alexander the Great going through and conquering, and then the Romans, and a very large chunk of land, then the Romans show up and really put under submission and control a large chunk of land in the Middle East there. And, of course, the Romans, they are known for what? Building roads. So you have this Greek language that is now being spoken by everybody in this empire, and there's roads going everywhere, and then you have Pax Romanos. You have Roman peace, for the most part, right? Because they've put everybody under submission. The perfect setup for the gospel to get out. Christ shows up at exactly the right time, the appointed time, and he lives out his ministry. He does it perfectly, as you would expect, from our King, from our God. And he dies in our place, taking that punishment we deserve as a sacrifice for us, right? And then the gospel, the good news of what Jesus did, goes out in one unified language, Greek. The entire New Testament in Greek. It goes all over those Roman roads, cruising all over the empire that currently is under Pax Romanos, peace, Roman peace, makes it all over the place, and the Christian faith is born, right? The good news of the Messiah that came, who died for both the Jews and the Gentiles. Awesome! But it makes no sense at all under Joseph Atwill's idea that, well, the Romans came up with this goofy religion and they wrote it in Greek to the Jews. No sense at all. Another interesting question. Why didn't the Flavians use this super secret weapon on their real enemies? Because look, these Jewish rebels, right, they were causing some problems. They were stirring up some problems, let's face it. They were a little bit of a thorn in some people's sides. But who are the real problems? There were so many others who were causing so much more problems to Rome, like the Gauls. They came in, the Gauls, they, on multiple occasions, were able to really inflict some major damage to the Roman Empire. And what about the Visigoths? And so many more. Rome had a lot of enemies, and some of them had, well, a lot more power than these rebellious Jews. Here the Romans went through all of this effort to come up with this psychological warfare on these rebellious Jews. And if it was so successful, why didn't they use it in other places? Why didn't they use it on some of their more real enemies, those who actually posed them a major threat? Because let's face it, they shut the Jews down at that time. They really did. Again, it just doesn't make sense. And here's another one that doesn't make sense. Here we have this Jewish Messiah that is predicting these apocalyptic images, this time of which the temple would be destroyed, not one rock would be upon another one, Jerusalem would be destroyed, and the person that is coming to do this damage, well, is pretty much being compared to the Antichrist. That doesn't make any sense. All right, so is Titus to be worshipped as, in Jesus' place? As in, everybody worshiping Jesus is actually inadvertently worshiping Titus? Or is Titus a shadow and type, if you want to talk typology here, of the Antichrist? Again, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, this conspiracy theory just simply doesn't work. Another thing that's fascinating is that we're supposed to believe, according to this conspiracy theory, that a bunch of Jews, a bunch of Romans came up with the deep theology and amazing wisdom that you find in the New Testament. Do you have any idea? We're talking about a propaganda program to supposedly calm down a bunch of rebellious Jews. And we've got incredibly deep, amazing theology, wisdom, thought, and very complex writing in the New Testament. And by the way, it doesn't contradict with the Old Testament. It fits perfectly, and this Messiah just happens to fit and fulfill all the prophecies of this coming Messiah spoken about in the Old Testament. Now, I'm not trying to make a Mormon / Islamic type argument of, look at how incredibly beautiful this book's written. There's no one on earth who could possibly write a book like this. No, there's a lot of people who could really write very well. But the wisdom that you find in the New Testament and how that can mold and change a person and really create a society that is just downright amazing, as America once was, really the New Testament is unparalleled. There's nothing like it. Well, good grief. It has been the best seller, the best #1 bestseller across the globe since its beginning, since they started printing it. All right, it has been the #1 seller. But supposedly it's nothing more than a joke that was put on the Jews to get them to worship a Titus under the name of Jesus. Jesus, Titus. Well, look, they sound the same. Jesus, Titus, they almost rhyme. Maybe we should all subscribe to Joseph Atwill's theory. All right. I mean, that's kind of how these parallels flow when we start looking at them. I'm going to go ahead and stop right there, friends. If you'd like to chat about this, you can catch me on Google+, Facebook, Twitter, myworldviewpage.com, or my email address, mike@youthapologeticstraining.com. And, well, I love you guys. and I'll see you tomorrow.